All right. I'm on the West Coast, and so is my guest. That's always kind of fun, and as opposed to calling the East Coast or Bucharest or Paris or something. But I'm having this. I think is going to be a very interesting conversation with American composer George David Kieffer. We're going to discuss. Do I just call you George after that?
Yeah, no, I always, you have these full names that you get when you're young. George David Kieffer, and George sounded like such an odd name for a kid. And somebody said, "Well, how are you going to sign your name on something?" Oh, well, my name is George David Kieffer, so that's what it is. But everybody calls me George Kieffer.
Okay, thank you. So anyway, we've done the formal thing, which of course is on your CD. That's like me, Daniel Kepl, and everybody calls me Dan. Let's go again. This is the 2021 help Nirvana Records release. What a wonderful crowd that whole Farmer crowd are with the notes that they put up online and everything else. It's called the CD is called The Ambassador's Wife and Other Stories, and the title alone when I went in, I take the deep dive on the day of the interview and just immerse myself for the day in the works that I'm going to talk about with composers. Um, the ambassador's wife and other stories. And when I first saw that on the CD, I just, like 17 huge question marks rose up from my head. I had no idea what this could possibly mean. This is orchestral music performed by the City of Prague Philharmonic Orchestra. Vincent Gio is conductor, and Vincent Gio also joins you in a collegial way to help do some orchestrations. And there's another man, I've got his name down here a little bit lower, but these are like tone poems because your descriptions are so incredibly precise and cinematic. That's the other thing about the way I think your mind runs. You see, you visualize in career and everything else, and then put it on paper. So I'm fascinated by this. Anyway, so these we're talking about 11 pieces for more, primarily orchestra pieces with piano obbligato, if you will, and some wonderful soloists, including a very French accordionist, as per a little conversation we had a few minutes ago. Um, it's just a wonderful CD. I'm going to give you the titles, all of you out there, so you get kind of an idea. 11 pieces, and then we're going to find out who George David Kieffer is. Oh, sorry, who George Kieffer is. Here are the titles. From Here, The Wonder of All Things, The Ambassador's Wife, The Clown Elegy, Fanfare for the Olympics, Saturday. Do you get my drift, everybody? Cold Mountain, fascinating. Christmas in Manhattan slash Her Manhattan, very interesting. Ella's theme, Forgiveness, C'est la vie is the last track. What I'm getting at is these are all stories. And one of my questions down a little bit after we find out who you are is, and it's not meant to be a silly or stupid question. It's kind of like what comes first, the story or the music? Because there's one in particular here that I swear you had to have imagined the imagery, the story first, or is it simultaneous? We'll talk about that. Okay, George Kieffer. Let's go. Ready? You've heard this a million times, I'm sure. Born in New York City, and that's there.
Right,
You
in
know, I,
Manhattan. But we moved when I was 7 or 8.
I know, but
Uh,
you can't get rid of it.
well, I claim it when I'm talking to New Yorkers.
There you go. That's wise and very safe. You got your, you've had this interest in music. We're going to go into some little bit of detail a little later because I'm so fascinated about this because all of us out here are, who are watching this interview, we are going to be looking at a double helix or something. This personality in front of me, bachelor's degree at UC Santa Barbara in history. You studied piano with Val Ritchie. That was when you were a student, kind of pre-college, or
Well, listen, let me tell you, I was looking at bios from all these people who, on Nirvana Records, in particular, because so many of them are academics on Nirvana and have that's their outlet for their music, and they've studied with this person. They went to this conservatory. They did this, and I said, what the hell am I going to say about where I came from? And I had a piano teacher, from like third grade to I don't know, for about 7 years by the name of Val Ritchie. I mean, he taught me. I mean, so I said, well, I'll just put down I studied with Val Ritchie. At least it'll sound like I studied with somebody.
Hey, we all fake it. Okay,
That's
we all sort of. It's not faking it. It's called growing. We grow it. We all grow the story, if you will. Story is the theme of the evening. So there, I got that one in for Val. But again, you get a degree in history from UC Santa Barbara, and then you decide maybe you'd better play it safe. I'm thinking, and you get yourself a jurisprudence degree. If I got that right, doctor in jurisprudence.
not a great job.
Thank you. Keep it simple.
Well, before that, after I graduated from college, though, I went back to Washington and knocked on doors trying to get a job in a congressional office, as a kind of a gap year, if you will, before law school. And because I probably at that time thought it was more likely that I would go into politics in some way, or public service in some way than anything else. And so the law school was, in my mind, kind of the training. If I was going to be in public life or public service, and I better know the law, and I better know how to approach the law. Now, sometimes you don't learn the things you think you're going to learn. Probably the same thing in music school, but that was my principal motivation at that time for going to law school. Now, it turned out that I got into a firm where I enjoyed the practice, but I also changed my practice multiple times and took time off, as you know, for so many other things that I did besides law, and had a long career in law. But initially, I didn't think I was going to remain a lawyer for very long.
All the money was too good. Don't deny it.
There is something, they tell you if you can do anything else other than your art, unless you are unable to do anything else except your art, do something else, because there'll be something always pulling you away from your art that makes it easier to escape, So I'd say that probably entered it, probably because I always wanted a family. I always wanted a healthy life. And I was never around musicians who, around a world when I grew up with my own family, my parents, where there was any discussion that you'd ever go into the music world. I mean, that was something you listened to or enjoyed, but you didn't do.
My dad was a dentist. It was always about dental school, always. Go ahead. But what I just lost my train of thought. I do remember my train of thought, which is that you went astray, didn't you? You made the mistake of moving here at age 8 to Los Angeles. What I'm getting at is I read here in your bio something about, well, you would sneak away and play piano, right? At some clubs or something. Well, wasn't that the lure that finally made you crazy?
Well, you've got part of it right. But really, when I was at UC Santa Barbara, involved in all the stuff that was happening at that time, which was a lot of revolutionary kind of stuff, and I was, as I've talked to you before, a history major and all that, but I didn't really think about it until years later. That when I got out of class, there were days that I literally ran to the music room to play the piano and to put on, in those days, records of composers that my mother had played and I'd gotten fond of, and Gershwin from the American, and Rachmaninoff and Tchaikovsky. And it's only been in recent times that I realized that how desperate I was to get to the music room. It was like I couldn't. There's nothing like that. But I ignored that fundamentally. I sort of either put that down deep somewhere. Still, I always played the piano, and I always played it in the dormitories and had fun with it. But that passion, I only realized later how much I was moved by that at that time, and I was. But I never got. But getting back to it, what happened was I played music then the rest of my life playing piano, and mostly that's my instrument is a keyboard.
But
Um,
also at home and for friends and stuff, as I recall. Very private. You had really for a long time. Yeah.
yeah,
Start me out on.
yeah, I would play for friends, and they would write a song and play a song for friends, and I used to do ditties for friends. Like if it was their birthday, I'd write something up. But I'd write stuff that was actually then I'd say, that was better than a ditty, and I'd put it away somewhere. And I have music from all these years of not doing it much with it. I have so much music now that is around me. People might think that I'm putting out music that I composed in the last year. Sometimes yes, or 5 years, but some of it I composed 20 years ago. The piece that's on my album called Ella's Theme was after a visit to the then Soviet Union in 1989. So just for the breakup. So that's how it was. Probably within 2 years after that I wrote that piece actually. So that's that's how long ago I was doing it, but doing it for myself on my clavinova.
Bless the clavinola. Despite
Bless
its
your
earlier imitations and stuff. The reason we're kind of going on about this a little bit is that you have had, without doubt, a very successful law career. I'll bet you're up on the 47th floor somewhere downtown Los Angeles. I don't know, but you're co-author of the new Los Angeles City Charter some years back. They don't just pick up people off the streets to help them rewrite their city charter, especially a city of 3.5 million or whatever it is. And as we discussed, you've served as chair of the board of regents of the University of California. So this is an enormous career all by itself, and you've already intimated, which I find really intriguing, that somewhere, somehow in the back, you can slap me around if I'm all wet on this, but somewhere in the back there always was this, that you may not even have been conscious of it, but something there. As you said, you would flee to escape to get to the music building, so to say, to sit down at the keyboard, and you would play for people and write ditties for friends and neighbors and fellow counselors and all that stuff. So it's been there, but give me I know there's a preceding CD of piano music, and basically you're doing a legacy life now, aren't you? You're kind of semi-retired, if I understand correctly.
Yeah.
So you can now pay attention to your real soul, if you will. Forgive me. I hope I haven't offended.
Yeah, you haven't offended me. No, the things I did before I wanted to do before. So it's not like, but now I'm devoting entirely everything my time to music, and I'm saying to some friends who are in a couple of friends who I know in the more commercial music area. I say, no, you don't understand. No, this is not a hobby. I am starting over again. I know it's a little late for some people, but I'm starting over again. Now, that is, it's been interesting to try to find my own pattern of time and how I use time now, because it's a different way. But full time music and doing what I can. I mean, you can't see back there, but there's a box. I can't even go through. There's a box of probably 100 to 150 cassettes of music on it from earlier times when I was using a cassette recorder to make my recordings on.
How thrilling is this for you? How thrilling is this for you to be able to finally focus on this? It sounds really thrilling.
It is, and it's a little scary because if you say you're going to be serious about it, it's not as light about that. It's much simpler to say during the rest of your life, well, I'm a lawyer, but I also play the piano. I'll play for a few friends, and so the reaction is, wow, somebody who's a lawyer who has that talent. That's a low bar, in a sense of making people, think well of your music. But once you then say, no, I'm going to be more than that. I don't have to be serious classical composer necessarily, but I'm going to be judged. I'm going to judge myself in a different way. I'm going to try to learn in a way that I didn't learn before. and it's not going to be as casual. Well, that's a little more threatening okay, George, you said you're going to do this now. Let's see what happens. So yes, but like all things where you're trying to jump across the creek, am I going to make it across the creek? And how wet am I going to get?
Rubicon.
The good news is, as you get to a certain age, you realize in the final analysis, you don't really care. You're going to do it for yourself, but you're going to have to try to do it well, and you can't be too sloppy. And I have a lot to learn.
Okay, pay attention, everybody. He is 1 year younger than I am, okay? And I couldn't agree with you more. I'm at a certain age where it's just like, I'm going to do it my way. That's all there is to it. It's just, that's just all there is to it. Um, so now we're going to get to some questions here. Um, let's see. This is another, I can't resist giving you a little bit of a rough time from occasion because my own mind boggles at what you do. Are you a polymath by any chance? As
No.
in, and it's because of the CD. This isn't just, you're just not noodling around. These are glorious, gorgeous, thought out, well arced songs. That's the professional musician, and you have help. Maybe doing some of the arrangements. I know a composer, I've forgotten his name just now, in Australia, who spent his whole career as a chef, a high-end professional chef, and then just said, hey, you know what, I'm a musician. And has been doing exactly what you've been doing ever since, making recordings, having people help orchestrate some of these big pieces and things like that.
Well, I have a lot to learn on orchestration, and so I need help. And but I try to give a direction of where I'm going, a feel from my piano playing, and then from the other instruments, whether it's digital performer, which I'm trying to get used to now, or the old clavinova that it's not pretty, but it tells you what the counter is. It tells you what the mood is. It tells you what the instrument is that I want to hear, a high instrument, a low instrument, what feeling I want out of it. But it starts with the piano. Usually it starts with the piano. Even though I might immediately have, a vision like in Ella's theme. I knew that Ella's theme was, in the end, had to be pick up. It had to be an orchestra playing Ella's theme, not just a piano. But I can tell you at some point in time an interesting story about not knowing anything, and therefore Ella's theme on the CD comes out in very different than I originally wrote it, because I wrote it so.
When we get to that piece, I have actually highlighted that one. It's such a beautiful piece of it, so moving. Let's talk about it then. Is that okay? It'll be in a few minutes while we're looking at this. Let me get a little clearer about I guess what I'm really still so fascinated about is I pick up of a real philosophy about music in society from you. Something about, and you have this career in law, you understand, you know what I mean? The complexities of the human condition. What am I trying to say even? You know what I mean? I see an overall philosophy about music and its function in society. You want to go there?
Well, I've never kind of thought about it that way, and we talked briefly before you turned the recorder on, where I was trying to put that together, and I need to think about it. I'm emotional about music. All musicians are emotional about, but you could say that my music is too sweet in some ways. Probably my family says it's always a little sad. So to me, there's a yin and yang. There's a beauty and there's a bitterness about life, I suppose. And there are always two sides. Not always two equal sides, but there are two sides to questions. There are points of view. I'm usually somebody trying to reconcile points of view in life. I wasn't the kind of lawyer who is a fighter. I was more the diplomat lawyer. So, but I don't think about the music that way. It just comes out that way. I did a piece on my solo piano album Well, actually, it's not on the album. It's something I did after called Au revoir, Michel, which was an ode to Michel Legrand. And actually it's a very pretty melody, but it's also sad, and I try to incorporate what he has in it. Maybe that's the confluence of these things that's coming out. But in the end, I'm kind of I cry at beer commercials. So um, I'm an easy mark, for trying to write something that
That's
it
the
first
beauty of.
moves me. I guess it first moves me, and then how do I make sure this moves somebody else?
Okay, we're getting there. I'm taking you to the sweet spot, I hope. But also, speaking in front, where it's the
You're
beauty,
going to force me into therapy.
it's the joy of our age area. And my confession, because I loved the Titanic since about age 10 when the film opened, just the ship sitting there in its gigantic magnificence in the opening scenes, and I was a basket case of tears of joy,
Yeah.
and you know, so it's good. I feel good about it, and so do you, I'm sure. You know what I mean? It's good.
Yeah, I guess the other thing I'd say is that I'm really moved by people who try, and I don't know if that's who try hard at something. That's why the Olympics, moves me so much. But that means anybody who's trying so hard to do what they want to do, and it can be the smallest things, and I don't know that I'm any different than anybody else on that, but that's what usually makes music come out the easiest for me is when I'm seeing uh, when I'm seeing people strive.
Well spoken. Although I'm a little depressed. No, just kidding. I'm just kidding. Um, let's.
Sorry.
I was going to. It's time for us to have a look at the pieces, but I think I cannot get, based on where we have been in the conversation, one piece. It's not quite the one you were thinking of. Is in my mind, and I'd like to. We're going to dance around a little bit, in other words, on the pieces, and you'll forgive them. Can you see that? But truly, the print is rather small. But this is what I'm trying. I'm trying to get at. Let me try and find it. Let me see here. Yeah. Okay. We're gonna look at the wonder of all things first. That's the second orchestral cut on the CD. And I'm going to just kind of read a few of my impressions as I listen to it, but I think it it leads to this question of how you visualize. Because I'm just going to here's your very note. Hang on, got to get the lights up. Terrible. It's terrible good getting old. Anyway, um, the wonder of all things. And here is your storyline. You create this. You tell us what this story is about. A very young boy is back to us, which to me is like you're the cameraman. It's so cinematic. Um, is playing his lesson on an upright piano. It's a charming piece, buddies. He then He then ascends into the sky and flies over the land, seeing many wondrous things before coming upon a beautiful field where an orchestra is playing his same piece, and now he is conducting the orchestra. Ah, but no, he is back at his piano. I mean, is that you? To start it.
In a way, yeah, yeah. But it's not that. It was. Yeah, I would say it's my. In my head of what isn't this. In some ways, first of all, the title. I sort of I took the title from something else. There's a book that was written called The Wonder of All Things, and I think they were, so I always was taken by that title. But isn't it the wonder of all things? Any boy at a piano, first of all, playing, because that's how they start. And as you know, that piece starts out with what sounds like a piano lesson.
Lovely.
Um,
So
and
brilliant, so intelligent. Yeah.
so then it's like your dream. Could this happen to me? Um, yeah, I mean, I think that it's there.
Here's a couple of my notes. Such precise visual musical imagery, and that comes to me over and over again in looking at this CD. And that's, you know what I mean? That's a huge compliment. Precise visual musical imagery. And you have told us this story, this amazing story, and it is an amazing. It's a beautiful. If we don't exhaust the word humanist, it's a beautifully humanist story too. We all, as children, fly off into our fantasies in the sky and have fabulous, wonderful dreams, and then it's over. We're back practically, and so whatever. But the point is, it's such a lovely idea, and these are all orchestral pieces. So you have had some how does that work? Do you do a little? Oh, remember, I remember you explained it. How you work at the Clavinola in the way that it gives you some idea of the sound you might want to hear, and then the orchestrator helps you. Or how does that work?
Well, so like in that piece, it started with that piano opening. That was and the theme that came out of my head. But then I will put down my own version of strings, my own version of of clarinet or whatever it might be. It's pretty sloppy. And I'll turn to an arranger and say, look, this is what I've got. Help me put this together so it doesn't look like I mean, some things sound very close. I mentioned, there's a couple of those pieces that sound exactly like I originally did them because the strings are pretty simple. Ella's theme is one of them. And others, I will say that I think the arranger gets some additional credit for some of the energy behind it that I couldn't quite create.
And those are because let's discuss this because I have other composers that also have know what they want and orchestrators kind of help them see through it. And you've already indicated that you with the clavinola you have an idea of I think I'd like horns here. Or it sounds if I've got you right. So you're at a much higher level. But since it all starts from piano, what I get those inner voices and all the beautiful orchestral writing. I can understand, your consultations is probably the better word, collaborative efforts with an arranger who has all the experiences. This man is a Hollywood composer arranger, I think, conductor, Gio. Um, but you are reasonably clear, right? Nobody's going to talk you into anything, are they? Like,
Oh
oh,
no,
I think.
no. And I'm always surprised at how any arranger, because I'm working with an Argentine arranger right now on a whole area of Latin music. But I'm always struck and impressed by how much they want. They do not deviate from what you tell them, and they don't want to. They're not taught to do that generally, unless you've told them in some other way. But I do give a lot of direction because I can play any instrument I want to on the clavinola and now on Digital Performer. I'm just not as good. I cannot make the strings sound like I want them to sound. I cannot give the horn the same kind of a sound that I want to give it. But other people can. And people who now work with, Pro Tools or Digital Performer can create a total feel so that can be transferred to the orchestra and to the written music in a way that really gets it across. But I say I do get help in the ultimate outcome.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Because again, what I hear, excuse me, I hear lots of inner voicing and whatnot, and you have already made me very clear that you're a pianist. You do that. Nobody is filling in middle range lines for you. So it's all yours, including your own ideas about orchestration. And then because this is not your expertise, you've been running the University of California, let's say. It's nice to have people come in that can kind of help smooth the way.
The other thing I think is that, and I'm not sure about this because I got a lot to learn, but I think if you're used to playing piano your whole life and you're playing your own music, piano, you are putting in parts without thinking about it. So I will often, the arranger will say, I say, that was interesting. And they say, well, you had it. Let me show you where you have that. And you just did it because you needed it. you don't have an accompaniment, so you have to put your accompaniment in some way. So it sneaks in too.
Yeah, exactly. The ambassador's wife. This is the third cut. Once again, an amazing story. Talk about bittersweet. Um, the young woman marries an older man, and the story, if you will, the emotional content of this piece, in my view, is very, very special in that it is bittersweet. There are disappointments, there are anticipations. You put it all in here. Let me see if I got anything. A young woman marries an older man. They both have to cope. They both, it's like the story of mankind, getting together and having procreating or something. You got to cope. Um, uh, and you use the violin. I presume that's the woman. I'm just guessing from my imagination. Hello, which you've
Correct.
got the sizzle of. Most emotional solo instrument, of course, it is. It's perfect for that. And then I do. Here's where I, at the risk of being offensive, which I'm not, of course, and we talked about this, but I hear what I'm hearing emotionally is Fiddler on the Roof. The
Is
use of
what?
that Fiddler on the Roof. The use of that violin. What I mean is that
Uh-huh.
poignant playing. Go.
Didn't
What?
think about it.
Of
The
course not. It's your music.
you know, I was I was actually at the home of an ambassador in the Dominican Republic, and in this house was a piano, big piano, and I just looked around and I knew the ambassador and his wife, but it was not their story. They were people of the same age. But as I sat at the piano, the story came to me of a young woman, marrying an older man, um, buying what she thinks she's buying, but not knowing what she's buying, and the life that she has put herself into. And what would then happen? I thought. That's how that came about.
Well, let's deal with it a little bit longer because I'm intrigued. I think what you just described is you're at a party or whatever, and you sit, you find yourself the piano, sit down and improvise and noodle around, and you're starting to get this idea. So, what did you walk out of that party with? Something kind of more or less complete in your head, if you get me, or was that just a little thing, and then months later it came back to you as an idea?
No, well, there was no party
Oh,
at the time that it was just the place was clear. It was kind of a, I don't want to say dilapidated, but it's the way, think of an ambassador's house that's been left a little, it's gotten a little run down,
like the
and
fall
it
of
was,
the jaw, something
and
like
so
that.
it felt a little bit creepy in that way. But the piano was great, and so I was just at the piano, and so what sometimes happens is you're at the piano and a tune comes to you, and when the tune comes to you, then the story comes to you. You're in the ambassador's house. You just saw the ambassador's wife. The ambassador's wife is a great title. That's what this is about. You sort of accept the fact that there's got to be a meaning for why I'm here and composing this at this piano in the ambassador's house, seeing the ambassador's wife. But I don't want to write that story. I want that situation,
Mm.
but that's not a good story. The good story, or the more dramatic story, is the young girl who makes a bad choice, or a bad choice is made for her, and so
And
later has to suffer from it.
and because your mind is so vivid in with its imagination, you tell stories so vividly. What's with the? Hang on, I'll find it. What's with the romantic French style accordion playing? What do you see in that moment, in that bit? The ambassador's wife.
Well,
So that piece.
there's something interferes with the situation and draws it creates the conflict, the immediate conflict, as opposed to the tension conflict that probably was building up to a moment where she sees a man across the room who's a handsome man her age, who they dance with, and they dance or they suggest they're going to dance, And
And that is that very
you,
French, very sexy French, the typical French, striped shirt, accordion music by the lamppost kind of moment. Yeah.
well, so in my view, that the ambassador is a wealthy bad guy, and he's got a henchman, and she's a 22-year-old girl, and she's not supposed to be looking at or dancing with anybody that he doesn't want her to dance with. And there's a warning, but in the end, the uh, the love interest does not do well, and she is back in her cage.
You know what? You probably could have been a writer. I wonder. You just extemporized, as I've not. That this went way beyond the story that you put on the story. You know what I mean? This is what I love about you. Your imagination is like a 10-year-old. Hello, like that kid in
I've
the
been called a
back.
10-year-old before, yeah.
Just I can do it because we're 90 miles away from each other. You're not going to hit me. We might talk litigiously later, but
Yeah.
anyway. But you see what I mean? I mean, you have just given us an even further uh, slice of your amazing imagination and just telling us, extemporizing even on the story that you have given us as a base story to work. You see what I get? This is what fascinates me so much. Therefore, it's now time because I've actually highlighted this one. This, again, we're speaking everybody 11 wonderful orchestral pieces. I think some of them are 5 minutes, 3 minutes. I can't remember if there's anything much more than 6 minutes. But beautiful little vignettes, if you will, of as you everybody out there has heard of this this wonderful storytelling capability. So the clown elegy. Let me just throw this about the happy sad dichotomy. Take it from there.
Well, you don't know. There's so many comedians that you know of. Who is the great comedian? I mean, so many comedians have committed suicide, have gone into for treatment of various kinds of things. Is that there's, and I'm not saying all comedians, and I sort of equate them with clowns, with the clown to entertain, make people laugh. But is the clown really happy? And there are so many stories of comedians or people in that world who are there to entertain and to make you laugh, who laugh a lot, but inside they're not really laughing, it's a sad situation. So I use a theme in there that I don't, a theme I think is very pretty and sad, but I try then to turn the sad theme into a happy kind of event where I have this picture of clowns and kind of almost disrupting an event, a performance, and making fun and having a good time. And so there's laughter about it. But inside that same melody that you can play in one way, you can play in another way. And if you play the other way, you realize that the clown is really sad. And when they go home and take off the attitude, whether it's the comedian or the clown, and they're in their own place, things are not necessarily as easygoing and as funny and as light. And so that's the clown elegy.
What came to mind to me really quite immediately is clown makeup in general is sad, and then it's up to the clown with the big shoes and changing the expression on the face. The makeup is
True.
the tears dripping down the side of the face, and yet they do antics and things. Here's what you just described that. There's I found this so interesting because the piano opens with kind of a dirge.
Yes.
Motive, almost. It's really a dirge like motive. You use English horn. It's a lovely color and very very sad if you will, very sort of distant and melancholy. But the slapstick clown motive. Charming, even the musical illusion of those clown horns. I could have sworn I heard something, stuff like that. This whole little section, this interrupted sentence of clown humor, um, and all kinds of sounds of the trade is what I'm hearing. Very imaginative, fun. Then back to the tears. That's what I was saying. It's just beautiful, poignant, fabulously realized. The orchestration is just brilliant.
Well, Vincent gets credit for a lot of that feeling of the laughter of the clowns, where they come in with some of the instruments that sort of suggest they're laughing. Um, uh, so he gets a lot of credit for that.
That kind of creating those kind of colors and
Yeah, creating a color in the horns is sort of a repeat, but it's in a way that's sort of like ha 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 ha. It's a little bit of a laugh like that. But I also had this image, and I told him that I almost had an image of monkeys running over an orchestra too at one point in time. They're just like, just having a lot of just throwing stuff around. And if you'll hear the second time we go through the main melody, when it's an up melody, it's intentionally hitting wrong notes. And when we were doing probably not enough wrong notes, but when we were doing in the studio doing it, the studio person, I forget his name, who was from London, who had come over to Prague, because he works between the two places. He heard the orchestra play. He said, "Stop, stop, stop! What do you?" I said, "No, it's okay, it's okay. They're supposed to be playing like that." He said, "Oh, okay."
That's good. That's a good story. Fanfare for the Olympics. This was premiered at the 2015 Special Olympics in Los Angeles. And the reason I want to spend a little time with it is, as again, I think I mentioned to you before we recorded, I'm thinking of, just forgotten his name again, the great 1930s film composer who preceded John Williams, if you will. And so it is not an insult to declare your fanfare for the Olympics, for the Special Olympics of 2015, absolutely stunning in all those very same ways. Lots of gorgeous use of low brass and whole French horn, and how the orchestration gets busier and busier, and the forward movement and pulse of the whole thing. It's just a glorious Olympic fanfare.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you.
What was that? Was that? By the way, just because we're on the subject and I'm giving you a rough time about it, did you have a fantasy about that one too? Some kind of big image fantasy of soaring over the Olympic stadium?
No, not a particular one, but it's just that when I was a kid, I remember the Olympics were so important at one time, and there was this sort of this sense of striving, as I said earlier, to me was so important. And there's sort of in some ways, a nationalism involved, but there's also an internationalism involved. So to me, it was the old phrase, the agony of defeat, the joy of victory, agony of defeat, whatever it is. And so it wasn't a person, a situation. It was just the notion of the Olympic. And I just said, hey, I wonder if I could do an Olympic theme. I said, is anybody ever going to get tired of John Williams' theme? So you have let's talk about the fantasy I had was that somebody would play this someday, on NBC. And so I still hold to that fantasy,
Oh, come on, you've got a good retirement income, I'm sure. You don't need NBC. Come on. But just kidding. I hope you didn't take offense at that remark. But the point is that what you are is a tunesmith. I guess it's the short way of saying what I'm trying to say with a whole bunch of words, which is you have this tune thing, and they're all unique and uniquely yours, and they're all gorgeous.
Well,
so when
you.
I refer to John Williams referring to this fanfare, people can imagine that kind of sweeping tune. It's your tune. It's not John Williams' tune. It's your tune, and you capture all of that excitement. And I love the way we may have touched on earlier. There are some people that are just eternally optimistic, and that's you, I think, because everything just ascends, just goes up and up. It's bright, and I don't know. It just speaks to the kind of human being you are, I think.
Well, maybe I don't know. I don't know if I'm an I don't know. I'm an emotional guy. I'm just a you know just an old romantic is what I am. And the Olympics to me, if it, my they haven't been recently, but as much. But to me, they're among the most romantic notions that you could have, where of success and failure and effort and all of that coming down to a moment, where you are there and honoring that is what an Olympic theme is about. And so I'll tell you, we recorded that, and one of the things that Vincent said to me, just in joking before we were over there, and it was not about this piece. He said, well, the horns always play too loud. And I don't know if that's true or not, but I tell you, on this piece, the horns played very loudly, and they were in everybody else's microphone. So there are parts in there where they get a little bit in the way of the rhythm that you referred to. There's a rhythm that was trying to be created of almost a race. And I said, we got to turn the horns down in the mixing. And they said, Joe, we can't turn the horns down. They're everywhere. And it's not that they shouldn't have been there. It's just that they did overwhelm a few other instruments that didn't get a chance to be heard.
No problem.
So you're okay with it.
Yeah. Nah, it's a grand fanfare. Thank you, horns of Prague. Okay. Now, but it doesn't. The storytelling is very hard to spend less than 3 hours on, frankly, because I'm looking at Saturday.
Yeah.
A journey through the day, indeed. And do you want to tell us? Why don't you? And let me give it a. Well, it's a magical American. I call it a magical American morning manner. And what I'm talking about is that sonata, that Americanness, those open fifths or whatever. I don't think they're here, but just that idea of Americanness. The images are so the musical images are so vivid of this morning in my mind and yours, I presume as well. This morning in America, something about that. There's no place. Oh, and by the way, I practically think I hear two tunes actually. You're going to tell me whether I'm all wrong or not, but I swear there's no place like home. I swear I hear those pitches.
Didn't occur to me at all. Well, you know what happened was, and I'm surprised that I decided to put this on the album, and I'm surprised that people like it, because it really is very simple. It is such a simple set. I wish that I could have to remind myself about it, in a sense that it just goes back and forth. And I said, I was actually just thinking, before I decided what I wanted to do, I said, can I do a whole piece that is basically the main theme is just just this octave kind of back and forth? Could I get away with that? Is that something that I could do? So that was how it started. And then then I thought, you know what? Let's just try to go through the whole day like that, but change it enough so that we have some attitude about what's going on in the daytime. So that's how we go through a slow yawning morning, and we kind of gain our steam, and then we do our errands and shopping, and then we get ready for the evening and the big blast, and then we go, and then we're dead tired after a bunch of drinks, and with night and partying, and being with somebody we want to be with maybe, and then we're so tired we go to sleep, and we go to sleep with the same melody that we woke up with. Mm-hmm. So that was kind of what I was.
And in terms of just colors, wonderful ideas that I don't know why, but they work. This addition of, I think it's Celesta in the very end, that little tinkling sound is magical.
Yeah,
what I'm getting is the piece of Saturday. It's about a day in the life, nothing big, nothing particularly extraordinary, but it's how we all live, and there's this, and wind down is this additional little tinkling celeste or whatever that instrument is. It's magic, and what I'm getting at is a kind of childlike happiness, whether adult or otherwise, and optimism, as I said. What I suspect you of being is way too optimistic, as the piece ends with, and I think I heard, and good night.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. Well, it was you heard, lullaby and good night. Yep.
You got it. So I thought that was terribly clever. Okay, you have already confessed. How are we doing? Geez. Hang on, I don't want to give up on this one just yet. Oh, we have to do Ellis thing. Let's just touch very briefly on Cold Mountain, because the Charles Fraser novel. I've read it. It's just brilliant. It's a brilliant novel about the American Civil War, but in a very very interesting, cavity of the war, if you will, in the Appalachians and the struggles of women left alone to live, in the middle of nowhere on their farm when the men go off to war. What do you do? Learning how to slaughter a pig that the men used to do. All that stuff. Let alone, it's a beautiful beautiful novel. I recommend it to everybody. Charles Fraser's Cold Mountain. And your wife apparently told you about it. This is my
Yeah.
accusation about your imagination again. You haven't read the book, but bam, you went off on it. It's
Yeah,
gorgeous. It's wonderful.
well, thank you. Well, she told me, I just finished this great book. Oh, and she was emotionally drained from it. And I said, well, what was it about? And so in about, 2 or 3 minutes, she told me the story, or maybe it was 5 minutes. And I went, whoa, and I think it was that same night, within an hour or so, I went and wrote that theme. That entire theme was written in that night. Um, and then no, that was again something that I wrote a number of years ago, and finally pulled out to say, let's try it. And I've thought about it in different ways since, because it was inspired directly by Cold Mountain, but I've thought about it since, because you try to find places where you could place your music or use your music. Cold Mountain was a movie. They made a movie of it. They had a score that was a beautiful score that was very, very different kind of score than this is more traditional romantic score, kind of undergirding a very sad situation. Anyway, it came out of my wife retelling me of the story. I should listen to her more often on what she's reading.
And it's a beauty. So in your retirement, you must do it. But the point is, what somehow this is what blows my brains out. Somehow she tells you 3 minutes. She tells you the story of the novel, and you go into a trance or something, and come out later with this wonderful tone poem, if you'll allow me, Cold Mountain. Uh, and I mean, by the way, and you are this tunesmith. I don't know, you're gonna have to do more with this. Which is that it's just such a beautiful, beautiful tune, and it's so appropriate somehow to America in the whatever in the 19th century. Don't ask me why. I have no idea. But it also speaks. I'm trying to say something about your confidence about the image, the story you're telling. I see fortitude. I hear fortitude. See what I mean? I hear righteousness. As I said, I hear Americana. I hear a call across the mountainscape. There's a horn call
Yeah.
that goes that to me sounded like it's somebody, because we're talking the Appalachians, I think, if I recall correctly, North Carolina
Yep.
somewhere, in the middle of nowhere, and that horn call that literally echoes across the mountainscape. Am I just having my own fantasy or what?
No, no. Obviously, intentionally, it was there, and it was sort of to suggest this, the distance and so forth. Later, as I said, even though it was inspired by the Cold Mountain book, when I would listen to it later, it's more of an anthem, is as much of an anthem, an American anthem. There's almost a sense of that of a group uh, trying to get somewhere. Of course, in the story, as I recall, the man was trying to get home to his family. But if you can picture that piece also with a whole group of people, in my mind, I was seeing slaves, African Americans trying to get out, or a group of others trying to get somewhere, and what it took to ford the streams, to get over the mountain, to get to where they want to go. So again, it's this notion of striving, and then do you get there, is kind of what I heard when my wife's telling about an individual, but I also later identify it as much as with a group trying.
Damn, that's good. Wonderful. Well, the reason I'm kind of touched by your this idea of a group, and you describe it differently, but in fact in the novel it is a group, a small group of men, and they're actually being chased by their own kind. The Confederates are chasing them for being deserters from the Confederate
Yeah.
army. So,
No. Yeah. Right.
So, anyway, it's stunning. I'm going to leave Christmas in Manhattan, alone this time. It's from a teenage dream you had. When do you stop dreaming about spending Christmas in love in Manhattan? That should do it, right? So I can move on to Ella's.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Because this really is something you will talk to us about. I've got a whatever double triple X in front of it. Ella's theme. I've read this story, and I've mentioned to you how I responded to it. It's absolutely touching. Tell us your experience, Ella's theme.
So I was on a strange trip, not as a lawyer, but on a kind of a scheme almost. I had a friend who wanted to sell, believe it or not, sell soft serve ice cream machines to the Soviet Union. I mean, he was involved with them because he put the brains in the soft serve ice cream machines, and the Taylor company, which makes those machines, always had this vision of selling them to the Soviet Union. And the Soviet Union in those days was a mysterious place, getting it more mysterious again, but opening up a little bit. Anyway, we went over there, and he and two friends of mine, and we were in a bar, and this woman was singing a Barbra Streisand song, with a nice voice in Moscow. Excuse me. Yeah, and she was singing in a very heavy accent, but singing, a Barbra Streisand song. I don't remember which one it was. And my very, aggressively friendly friend invited her to come over to the table and then talk. And he has a tendency to do that, and not just with women, but anybody he's interested in. And she talked to us. And then I spent time with us and she told me her story. She was from Azerbaijan. I think that's the pronunciation. She might as well have been from Ukraine, because she spent time in then Kiev. But she was essentially persecuted she's a Jew, persecuted heavily, also for some of her political beliefs, hounded, and she was looking, and she'd lost a child in a very, very sad circumstance that I won't go into, but I would blame Soviet authorities for it. But she wanted to get out of the Soviet Union, and I ended up helping her get out ultimately. But when she told me her story of her life and her child that she lost, and the friends that she had, and that they've been, it just was such a story of survival again of her, and eventually she survived. But it was such a story. So I had in my mind the piano player is playing a very simple piano, is telling the story to the listener, and then what I call the chorus, the section of it, is giving her kind of grand statement of "I will survive, I will make it through this situation." So which she did. So that was kind of it. But an odd thing happened. I wrote that piece, as you can see, we put it out last year, but I wrote that piece in like 1992, 93.
And then stuck it in a drawer or something? You know what I mean? Scribbled it down and stuck it away somewhere?
No, everything is here.
Oh, okay.
Sometimes it's on little notes, but it's mostly here. But when I played the melody of it and I played the piece, I played it much more rubato. then it came out, and so. But it was, it was smooth. I turned to then a different arranger person to put strings on it, and they're very simple, and it's very similar to what I did, so it didn't change much. But when he did it to a click track, obviously straight, as the musicians would have to read it, not on a synthesizer the way you'd like to hear it. It stayed that way. So the music stayed stiff like that, and not being experienced as a conductor and so forth. Is when we came forward and we did some rearranging of it, but it stayed in that form. So when it's played very mechanically, and it comes out fine. I don't mean to say, but it comes out very differently than how it was first composed, which was much looser than the melody that's there now. So I learned that when the next time I'm in, with an orchestra, I've got to pay more attention to that aspect of your field, conducting, and moving the orchestra beyond what's on the sheet music in front of them. But it happened by accident because it was done 30 years earlier.
Yeah, and if I think I understand correctly, it's about getting rid of the bar line. That's my job. That's the conductor's job, to get rid of the bar line.
Exactly.
So things can breathe, so they can speak, and so forth. And by the way, Ella's thing speaks big time as is. Okay, and you do have a conductor. Your
yes. So it turned out fine. It was just a surprise to me that I wasn't paying attention to it.
And once again, just a lovely melody. And I use, without offense, I hope, in my mind, I'm. It's the temperament of Schindler's List. There is this sadness, and of course, your use of violin and piano. It's just so touching, and yet utterly and completely your own material.
Well, it was written before Schindler's List, but I agree. Schindler's List makes me cry every time I hear it. If I hear Itzhak Perlman playing, that theme, all he has to do is play that theme, and I am, balling up.
A mess. Okay, Forgiveness, and then we're gonna wind it down. The last piece on the CD is C'est la vie, and it's again I'm just gonna touch on it here. It's just that's it, folks. It's life. I mean, you really speak very clearly to the editor. That's it. It's lovely. It's simple. It's just well, over and over I say to myself, a lovely evocation of the idea of life, its ironies, its joys, its tragedies, so on and so forth. Without sounding too corny, you get it. Okay, that's C'est la vie to end your album, and we've always been through this when I talk to composers and people creating CDs. Everything very carefully put together. You assemble. That's a beautiful ending of the album. But now let's just have maybe a farewell, and then we'll do a rundown of with the next to last piece, Forgiveness, and again it's this violin piano narrative. It's really, again, quite moving. Beautiful piece. Can you give me a little something about forgiveness, if you remember putting that piece together?
It's just, I don't know that it just felt like forgiveness. The first three, the repetitive part that sort of begins each of the themes. Mm-hmm. I have a piano in front of me, but da 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 da. So I want to just sort of say, forgive us, forgive them. My vision was originally that, and I never completed it, was to have that part sung in different languages. Those words, forgive us, or forgive me, or forgive them, sung in multiple languages, because this notion of forgiveness probably, it's a very, very important to me. It's an important representative of growth of a human being, to be able to forgive. Um, and
In fact, I'm going
so,
to quote you. I'm going to quote you. I think this is your quote. This essential virtue. And then
yeah,
in the program notes, forgiveness. This essential virtue. That's big. That's a big brain thought. Forgiveness. How essential that virtue among all the human virtues is to forgive, even horrible things. Okay. Wow. All right. I'm going to go back up up to the top and we'll wind it down. Uh, but as you can see, I'm having a chat with a vividly imaginative writer in music.
thank you.
How's that? American composer George David Kieffer, your, and this will all be up on Performing Arts Review with links to buy the CD and all that good stuff, but and to your website and so on. But we just finished discussing your 2021 Navona Records release, The Ambassador's Wife and Other Stories. I mean, it is packaged with such, even the title is simplistic and still a gigantic mystery. So that, I mean, that all alone is amazing. I mean, you just, okay, what story? Okay, the ambassador's wife. We'll put that as but there's a whole lot more to this CD and to these lovely orchestral tone poems. I can't think of anything else to say. People out there in our profession who are looking for stuff, looking for material, Fanfare for the Olympics is an absolute must for programs, for concert programs. Cold Mountain, I mean, on and on and on. So here are these bonbons, if you will. And the music is so accessible, which is also very, very important. I feel very strongly about that, as I'm sure you do too. Very romantic, gorgeous melodies. Every single tune has this beautiful melody, wonderfully orchestrated. It's just a beaut, and I'm surprised. I go into all of these CDs the day that I begin to sit down to have a look. Because that's when I do it. That's when I pull the CD out of the sleeve and stick it in and start to explore it. What an amazing surprise as well.
No, thank you. You're that's very kind.
Thanks much for having a good long yak with me.
Well, it's good. It was a good yakking with you.
Okay. Oh boy. Thanks, George.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Have a good night.